Hey, world, what up? So, the LA Clippers, the team that was favored to win the championship last season, who folded to the Denver Nuggets, the baby Nuggets, by blowing a 3-1 series lead in the Western Conference semis, quote unquote, reloaded this season. And in the first round, or prior to the first round, they were quote unquote tanking to get that fifth seed to avoid the Lakers until the conference finals and take on the Dallas Mavericks in the first round. And what's happened these first two games? Well, Luka Doncic has played in the playoffs for 8 games now, averaging 32, 11, and 10. Pretty much in that range for a triple double, if not so. And the Dallas Mavericks are up 2-0 on the LA Clippers. Pandemic P is back in action. Kawhi Leonard and the team is not able to close in the fourth quarter. Ty Lue is clueless out there. And the supporting role players are not performing with the LA Clippers. No emergency, no leadership within their team. And they're down 0-2 to the Dallas Mavericks, heading to the American Airlines Center for Game 3 on Friday. That leaves the Dallas Mavericks in a peculiar situation because 93% of teams win an NBA playoff series if they're up 2-0. So that's great news for the Dallas Mavericks, who are resilient. And pretty much from last season, we did expect the same thing, but Kristaps Porzingis was both suspended and injured for a couple games or so. The Mavericks are in a great situation. This is panic mode for the LA Clippers. And big picture, the LA Clippers were supposed to be one of the main competitors for the LA Lakers, and it looks like the Clippers are going to get bounced early within the first round. So that leaves the Western Conference up in the air to take for the making. Now, you already know my position about the LA Lakers being my quote-unquote favorites to come out of the Western Conference. And this is looking even more positive on that spectrum. If and when the Dallas Mavericks win this series, you do have the Memphis Grizzlies up 1-0 against the Utah Jazz, and a Donovan Mitchell who's quote-unquote injured or day-to-day. So let's see how that plays out. But this is very good for the Dallas Mavericks on the short-term and long-term spectrum of things. Let's jump into here and kind of see the panic mode for the Clippers and the reaction.
Clippers down 0-2. This was your team once upon a time. Is this series over? I had
series over after game one? No. But after game two, this performance, yes, I would have to say the series is most likely going to have to be over. I don't see Luka Doncic folding within the next, most likely, 5 games or so. They'll get it done with. The Dallas Mavericks pretty much need to win 2 out of the last potential 5 games, and they'll do so. They'll get it done with. For Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, this is not a good look at all whatsoever. I mean, for them to not even reach a conference finals in either or of these 2 seasons. But for the Dallas Mavericks, this is a huge awakening within the next, couple seasons in future, having Luka Doncic, who's going to be a restricted free agent. Of course, he's going to re-sign, but this is huge for them. Yeah.
get it in.
Yes, Jenna, it is over. And Brandon's Clippers, man, it feels good to say that. Brandon's Clippers are done. Finished. Toast. It's over. Do I need to go Kenny Smith on them? This is over, okay? And here's why. Dallas is just better. The evidence is overwhelming. I know on paper the Clippers look better, but when they get on the court and face each other, sometimes matchups make, games as well as they make fights. They're just better. Look, they've played 5 games this year. The Mavericks have won 4 of them, 3 of them by double figures. They played 5 playoffs games the last 2 years where both teams were relatively healthy. Kristaps Porzingis played for the Mavericks. Dallas won 3 of them. Last night, Kawhi, he even makes Nick's medal stand. He was incredible in the first half and good in the second half. Goes for 41. Paul George, 28 and 12. The Clippers shoot 53%, 39% from 3 at home, and they still lose.
And real quick, Leonard had 41 that night, 32 in the first half. So we thought he was cooking within there. Originally, I did have the Clippers winning this series in 7 games. Is that still possible? Yes, it is. Does it look like the trend? No. They're a mentally weak team, starting from their head coach to their quote-unquote leader in Kawhi Leonard and downward. Kawhi Leonard is a leader, but when it comes to these situations, not when it comes to a situation of not having a team offensive system and head coach, then no, that's not the case. Kawhi Leonard has always needed a true head coach who drew up X's and O's and understood a team system, as in Greg Popovich and Nick Nurse, and with supporting role players that play within a team offense. The Clippers pretty much play ISO basketball. They pretty much reside on more Paul George and Kawhi Leonard star players out there, and that's not Kawhi's game. Kawhi's game is not ISO basketball. With the Spurs and the Raptors, Kawhi wouldn't even touch the rock sometimes until 5 or 6 possessions. They kept the ball moving. Players played off the ball. But with this Clippers situation, it's not the case. And we've seen the fall and pretty much the explosion of the Dallas Mavericks to the Clippers.
Like, the Mavericks are just better. They have the best player in the series. That's Luka Doncic. And I just don't think that the Clippers are mentally tough enough to bounce back from a 2-0 deficit. I really don't. And the fact that their defense is so poor, when you're the 8th best defense in the league during the regular season, when you've got the two best wing defenders as a tandem that we've seen in more than a decade, and you allow Dallas to shoot 59%, 52% from 3, and the way they were giving up the switch, like at the top of the key with Luka, it was like nobody wanted.
Oh, it was horrendous. And this notion that Kawhi Leonard and Paul George is this dynamic duo that it's one of the best wing defenders out there was a myth. We've heard that from last season. Not the case, especially when they're taking on the whole ISO offensive load. So they're going to chill more on defense. And when it comes to Patrick Beverley, we've seen him pretty much exposed for the last 2 seasons. He can't guard Luka Doncic. I don't want to hear this loudmouth from him.
Because it wasn't like Dallas was setting these stout picks every time down. The Clippers were just willingly switching and getting a worse player on Luka. And so they're done. This is their 5th straight playoff loss. Again, I just don't think they can bounce back. The only question now is, will they get swept? Because, Brandon, they're toast.
Listen, first off, it's not over. If anybody can overcome an 0-2 deficit, it's the Clippers when you look at the matchups. Everything you just said. Kawhi was phenomenal. Paul George broke through this whole playoff P deal. So when you think about this team and how they're built, the thing that you got to look at is the others. You got to look at the supporting cast. They didn't show up. Where was Pat Beverly? Where was Reggie Jackson? Where were those guys? Where was Marcus Morris? Like, they didn't show up. And so that was the difference in that game. That was the difference in game 1. When you look at Dallas, Luka, phenomenal, like sensational. Dude has ice in his veins. You talk about Mamba mentality. He has it all. But then you look at the others. You look at, his supporting cast. Everybody's hitting. I mean, who do you want him to go? When you talk about defense and defense philosophy, everybody is on fire on that team. Tim Hardaway, D. Smith, the first game. Come on, man. So if there is any team, with a matchup like this that can overcome an 0-2 deficit, it is definitely the Clippers.
The same Clippers team last season that blew a 3-1 series lead. Okay, Brandon. Okay.
Yeah, I think the exact opposite. I think of every team in the league, they are the least likely because they don't look interested in competing. The reason everyone is NBA Jam on fire is because they're all wide open shots. Brandon, I know at House of Athlete, you've had plenty of NBA guys come through in the offseason. And you know what's amazing about watching literally any NBA player just shoot around? They never miss. Never miss. Right. It doesn't matter who it is. They are all 98% unguarded. Well, guess what? The Clippers are going with the very revolutionary strategy of not guarding. So everyone's going to hit. And you know why, Broussard, the Clippers supporting cast is not playing well? Because their supporting cast stinks. and it has stunk for 2 years. And last year I told you guys this is a bad roster, and people called me a hater. This year I told you it's a bad roster. People said I'm out of my mind. Reggie Jackson's never been good in the playoffs. Marcus Morris has never been good in the playoffs. Serge Ibaka has been good in the playoffs. He's not playing. You've got an
And as this ad's gone, man, it's a shame that Serge Ibaka is not getting enough minutes, let alone starting. He's won a championship. He's played with the Thunder. He has experience. He needs to be playing out there. And he can stretch the floor out.
Offensive liability defensive point guard. You've got a slow-footed defensive liability center. You've got Nick Batum, who you got for the minimum because he was so bad last year in your crunch time 5. You got Rondo, who the Hawks couldn't wait to give away, supposed to be the saving grace. The team's not very good.
Shots at Skip Bayless.
The front office done a terrible job.
picked them to
On the
lose.
bright side, I did. That is correct, Jenna. I did
No, you
pick them
picked
to
them to
lose
win.
because I thought that I picked the Clippers to win this series. That's
Clippers
absolutely
to
right. I
win.
picked the Mavs
Yeah.
to lose. That's correct. But I never bought into the idea that this team was anything close to a championship contender. And what they are dealing with all of that, Wilds, is also the makings of a guy who is going to go down at worst as one of the 10 greatest players ever in Luka. And when you run into one of those guys, it's like, oh man, we better have it buttoned up.
Well, Luka's going to need at least 3 championships and 1 regular season MVP before that discussion.
And they don't. They opted for this matchup instead of playing the Blazers, who they're 6-0 against the last 2 years, and now they're getting their heads handed to them, and people are going to get fired, and guys are going to be traded, and the series is over. The era never started, and the battle for LA is as one-sided as Alabama Citadel is every year.
As it should be, as it always was. I've always stated, the Battle of LA has always been down to the LA Lakers. The Clippers have always had a nice team and foundation on paper. But when it comes down to in-depth within the playoffs, and it comes down to the big picture of closing out games and winning rounds and that mental toughness, it hasn't been existent. And now it's shown here for now back-to-back seasons early in the Western Conference playoffs.
Gee, throw the Alabama Citadel thing out there. Wasn't expecting that one. I got to look up my Citadel references, see how they're stacking up this year. Broussard, I blame you for some of this because we have a nice balance of personalities on the show. And you come on the show and you say, oh, young analyst, Nick Wright, I'm a seasoned veteran, and I think with my head, not my heart. And you convinced poor Nick Wright, who just did a long rant on how much he hates the Clippers, to root against his own son. So now he's kind of stuck in this odd bind where he picked the Clippers, but he's also rooting for his son, and that is your fault, my friend. So you also picked the Clippers to win, so I'm just going to try to be a little bit optimistic.
Chris Broussard has been taking L's ever since he said Kawhi Leonard would re-sign with the Toronto Raptors, and he pretty much had his quote-unquote inside sources. Ever since that, he's been taking L's, especially being on the LA Clippers bandwagon and you-know-what since of last season, and they folded in the playoffs, and then going on and so forth, so no. And for him actually being on the Brooklyn Nets all season, no.
Since our two, genius basketball analysts did pick the Clippers to win. There's only 4 teams in the history of basketball that have come down from 2-0. It was the 17 Celtics, the 05 Mavs, the 94 Rockets, and the 69 Lakers, 2-0 at home.
Yeah, I was going to say the 2006 Miami Heat in the finals, but they had home court, not the other way around.
Do you see a way that the Clippers can add themselves to that list? And I will give you a hint. Maybe playoff
Or with the 2006 Heat, they were away, and the Mavericks were at home. My bad.
Rondo comes out of his shell and emerges and delivers the Clippers a victory, because that's what they need. They need that sort of extra oomph. But the fact that he's yelling at guys and or coaches seems like it's trending in the wrong direction.
Wiles, I don't. I simply don't. Now, I could see a way they could make this thing a series. I think they'll probably lose in 5. But I can see them making this a series. I wouldn't.
No, I'm saying either the Dallas Mavericks outright sweep them, or this goes directly to a Game 7. It's either or. The Clippers are either hot or cold, hit or miss, all in, or they'll mentally fold. If they're getting blown out by the Dallas Mavericks in Game 3, Game 4, they're going to be done with. If they happen to win Game 3, then this could go to a Game 7.
Be shocked by that. But I meant it when I said I don't think they're mentally tough enough to come back from this. Their clutch time numbers show that that's a mental weakness. They've been outscored 20-2 in clutch time during this series. That shows you that during the meat of the game, they're right there with the Mavericks, if not outscoring them. But when it gets down to the nitty-gritty, they don't get it done. Now, Rondo, I'll give you that. Obviously he didn't play during the clutch last night, but he could help them in that. And if I'm Ty Lue, I'm playing Rondo down the stretch. Even if he's having a bad game, because his history is that he'll get it done more often than not in those moments. And so I would play him all the time at the end of the games. But no, I think this team is done. Like I said, the 5 straight playoff losses, I'm sure that's weighing on their mind. I will give Kawhi this. I thought he was dialed in last night. Like, just the look on his face, particularly offensively, he looked like he wanted that game.
Doesn't matter, Chris Broussard, when you have home court advantage and you go down 0-2 to a young Dallas Mavericks team, that does not matter. You have your 41 points. You got to get it done with. You got to put that pressure on Kawhi Leonard like a LeBron James, a Steph Curry, Kevin Durant in the playoffs. So I don't want to hear that. And Kawhi, for me, I still have Kawhi top 20 all time. Listen, just because of last season and this season, that's not going to drop him tremendously within that. He has 2 championships, 2 finals MVPs, let alone the first championship and first finals MVP. He was somewhat of a 4th option young pup. So I'm not going to rank that too high within there. But still, what happened in 2019, him winning that championship, even though there was injuries within the Warriors, but still, huge accomplishment for the Toronto Raptors and him. Puts him on one of the all-time greats out there. But overall, the Clippers are in shambles right now. They're mentally weak. They don't have a true leader. And whenever you add Kawhi Leonard with a partner of a Paul George, that's not a good fit. You need to have a dominant alpha presence, expressive alongside with a Kawhi Leonard. For example, Kyle Lowry was an ideal fit alongside him. Kyle Lowry was clutch. He had an alpha mentality out there. Now, he did have his episodes with DeMar DeRozan in the past, but Kyle Lowry being the second option, he was pretty much a loudmouth, but he was very expressive. And Kawhi Leonard is more of a chillax, mellow type. So they fit back-to-back perfectly together. With Paul George and Kawhi, they're both mellow. They're both chill. They're both not really outspoken. They're both not a true expressive leader out there. So when you're down 0-2 in a series, are teammates going to look at them for a solution? No, that's not the case. Luka and the Dallas Mavericks, they're rolling as of right now, making Dirk Nowitzki proud, as we saw in that picture. But overall, it's looking like the Dallas Mavericks are going to pull away with this to either face the Jazz or Grizzlies in the second round. And that'll be an interesting series with the Jazz and the Mavericks if that happens, because that conference final spot is up in the air as of right now. So that's good to see for these young NBA teams, the next generation. Went enough there.